chicken. I'm your guy.
Blinking.
I'll have what Joseph's has.
Look, somebody's talking about you.
This is what we call the voice of God.
Popping.
Everybody just gets to focus on you.
Grab me.
Probably not the best thing for an introvert.
I'm asking for you.
Well, I like a good chicken sandwich.
Touch me. Hi, David. Comment.
Oh my God.
Like.
You're actually an identical twin.
Push.
Maybe I'll just ask Julie to talk about what it is to be an identical twin.
Pick me up.
No, you didn't.
Shouting.
Surprise! Jeremiah, just hang on a second. I just got a text.
There's an edit for your new opening, Joseph.
I feel really honored to have been here, man.
But by the way, you've done a masterful job. Seriously.
It was such a joy.
Thanks, Joseph. It's an honor.
Good on you. This was a pleasure.
I mean, you are the prime example of how to pivot in this new environment.
I wish everybody gets an opportunity to interact with Joseph Jaffe and CoronaTV.
Who needs Cameo when I've got my own personal Cameo? January 19th, 12:01 p.m. and I am a happy, happy camper. Why am I a happy camper? Because I got a gift. Everybody loves getting gifts. I used to get gifts all the time when I was director of interactive media at TBWA and then I just stopped getting gifts. And you know, when I would get free pens, or I would see a pen or a notepad at a conference, I would take 12. Or one of those like stress balls at a trade show. But Christina DiGiacomo sent me this. I mean, I think she might be the first guest to send me a gift to say thank you. By the way, John, that is not in any way, shape, or form a coercion for you to have to send me a gift. Jon Miller is my guest in the background. But Christina, thank you so much. I mean, I'm a big Walking Dead fan. I'm also a big Monopoly fan. And yeah, it's amazing. You know, the smallest things are the cheapest things, are the most valuable things. I learned that in my first job outside of college. The smallest things, they often even don't cost anything. Oftentimes, it's a smile. It's someone remembering your name. It's the basic essence, an element of customer service, or what I call customer obsession. The smallest things are the cheapest things, are the most valuable and memorable things. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. My mom is here and she is watching. Hello, Ma. Tom Morris is seated for a soliloquy. I hope you like it. But first, let's talk about what day it is today. Does anyone know what day it is? It's a very important day. Can you remember what day it is? Well, that was intentional because it is Good Memory Day. Good Memory Day. So Bob Heyman, you are watching as well. I want to ask you this question. Can you remember the following? Can you remember the following? Person, woman, man, camera, TV. I want you to remember person, woman, man, camera, TV. And at the end of the show, we're going to test you to see how good your memory is. So let's just see how you guys do on this memory day indeed. Well, you don't have to remember our guests for this week because I'm reminding you and I'm telling you who our guests are. Tomorrow and Thursday, Jason Falls and Adam Ferrier. Jason at 4:30 p.m. tomorrow, because good friend of the show and regular Joey DeMont is doing something at 6, and I want to make sure I'm there to support him. So Jason Falls at 4:30 p.m. tomorrow, Adam Ferrier at 5 p.m. on Thursday, and then a wonderful community show. But first, let's focus on the man of the moment, Jon Miller. He is the Chief Marketing and Product Officer of Demandbase. We're going to talk. He was at Engagio. He was acquired. We're going to talk about moving to a new company. We're going to talk about a new position, moving from product officer to chief marketing officer. We're going to talk about the new vision behind the new Demandbase. A lot of things to get excited about. But first, just to remind you that on Friday, some other B2B legends, Melanie Diesel, Angelina Jespers, also Carla Johnson, Peter Rourke, and Scott McCain will round us out. So, birthdays. Well, Mr. Steve Rubin, did you think perhaps that I wasn't going to call you out? Happy birthday, one of our wonderful, wonderful regulars on the show. I would never, ever, ever forget. And, you know, Kerry O'Shea Gorgone, one of the previous guests. Kerry, we're not, for some reason, connected on LinkedIn or Facebook, but I did see on Facebook it was your birthday, thanks to the very reliable Steve Garfield, and I wanted to wish you a happy birthday as well. And then on LinkedIn, Jim Hurtado, Swarev, Kumar, David Heller, happy birthday to you. Well, moving right along, today, yesterday was a pretty intense, heavy, and I think worthy seated soliloquy to talk about Martin Luther King Jr., a specific quote, and to commemorate and to honor his memory and his legacy. But today we're going to move to something completely different. We're going to talk about a very biblical, if you will, and very important, a very divine aspect of what's called account-based marketing. Now, let me set the record straight. I am not a B2B guy. And B2B, for those of you that don't know, stands for business to business. Well, that's not exactly accurate. I'm totally a B2B guy in terms of the fact that my entire business is B2B. Consulting, speaking, workshops, and the like. But my focus career-wise has always been B2C, business to consumer. Over the years, I've heard many versions of this emerge, like B2B2C, business to consumer. According to Andreessen Horowitz, it's where your company sells a product or service to a business, gaining customers and or data from that business that you get to keep and use. And where, most importantly, that group of customers becomes untethered from the middle B, at some point they recognize that you, the first B, are the product they use. So think Affirm in consumer lending, Instacart for grocery delivery, or OpenTable for restaurant bookings. But it doesn't stop there. There's P2P, peer-to-peer, D2C, direct to consumer, and even H2H, human to human. Little hat tip there to previous guest on the show, Brian Kramer. Then there's ABM, account-based marketing. It seemed like this was the hot new trend in business to business marketing, which burst onto the scene, I want to say, about 10 years ago. Also known as key account marketing, it is defined as a strategic approach to business marketing in which an organization considers and communicates with individual prospect or customer accounts as markets of one. People were going gaga over this approach, like it was a revelation from Moses himself. And it's probably, though, ironically, as old as Moses on some level. It actually probably wasn't new at all. And I guess I only became aware of it because of my book, Flip the Funnel, How to Use Existing Customers to Gain New Ones. And yet, maybe there was something new to this approach that was somehow related to both the technology that enabled this to be done better, cheaper, and faster, together with companies that specialized in providing software services and software as a service known as SaaS that delivered on the promise and potential of a flipped funnel approach. So how could I argue? Ultimately, with all the technology, automation, artificial intelligence, and the like, when you boil it down, it comes down to the golden rule, doesn't it? Treating people as you would want to be treated. Combined with the 80-20 rule of business to business, which is probably more like 95-5 in B2B, the realization at the end of the day is always make sure that quality prevails over quantity, relationships over data and analytics. Simple as that. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And somebody that cares a lot is my guest today, Mr. Jon Miller, Chief Marketing and Product Officer of Demandbase. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Jon Miller is the Chief Marketing and the Chief Product Officer of Demandbase, 2 jobs for the price. I hope he gets paid double. He has a long history of establishing and leading some of the most notable marketing technology companies, and most recently, Jon was the co-founder and CEO of Engagio, which was merged with Demandbase in June of 2020. Earlier, Miller co-founded and was the original Chief Marketing Officer for Marketo, which was later acquired by Adobe. So he has some serious serious street cred. Let's welcome him onto the show. Welcome, Jon.
Welcome. Thank you. It's very good to talk to you. And I think that was an excellent soliloquy. So good setup for ABM.
So those are, I mean, those are some serious companies, Marketo, and like I even know of them, and I'm just a B2B outsider in the industry and Engagio. So congratulations for your vision, because I mean you clearly know how to start a company that gets later acquired. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, but I mean, Marketo was a great experience, obviously, because I was there through the IPO. I actually left before the acquisition happened. So, but I think this probably sounds a little braggy. I think what I've done pretty well is I've been able to see the trends of what's happening in marketing and try to position technologies against that.
Well, I mean, being able to see the trends is important, but there's something that's even more important than that, and that's timing. Often people are ahead of their time. Or just make the wrong decisions at the wrong time. So being able to spot a trend when it's happening or just before, and it is no different, right, to riding a wave or catching a wave, surfing. Being able to find that perfect timing. So I'm sure inquiring minds are going to want to know what's next. But we'll see if we have time for that leading question at the end. We're not going to worry about that today. But we are going to get to know you a little bit better. And, fun facts are always fun for me, maybe sometimes not so fun for my guest. But let's find out a little bit about you. And the first fun fact about you, it's something very close to my heart because my mom is hard of hearing. But why don't you tell us about your story in particular, about your hearing loss and that journey, and maybe some of the, let's say, silver linings or upsides of losing one's hearing, because I'm sure most people would say there is no upside at all about losing hearing.
Yeah, so I mean, for my case, it's kind of interesting. When I was in my mid-30s or so, I just started, just one of the things where I just started noticing, like, it's kind of a little harder to hear, and in a big meeting or something, a little harder to hear what people were saying. I remember it got to the point where, I started watching TV with subtitles on just because it was a little bit easier. And then when it got to the point where I realized I was actually avoiding going to the movie theater, I realized, okay, there's something going on that I need to kind of investigate. So I met with, I guess, an otologist, anyway, an ear doctor, and they ran a bunch of tests, and for me, it presented as what looks like conductive hearing loss. My nerves were fine, but there was actually a mechanical, issue where it seemed like the bones weren't vibrating properly. Now, it turns out this is not an uncommon condition called otosclerosis, where the bones of the inner ear harden. And there's a surgery you can actually do to fix it, where they literally go in and they laser out the stapes bone and replace it with a titanium one, which I thought sounded pretty cool. It's kind of like LASIK for your ears. And so I went in for the surgery, like very excited to wake up and be able to hear. And when I came out of the anesthesia, I woke up and they told me that they weren't able to do the surgery, that I didn't have otosclerosis. I had some other thing they'd never seen before, where my facial nerve was pressing up against the bone, preventing the vibration. And obviously they didn't want to risk cutting the facial nerve. So at that point, even though it was in my mid-30s, I went and I had to go get hearing aids, which was kind of a funny feeling, right? Because you don't tend to think of needing to do that in your mid-30s. Anyway, so since then, I've been wearing hearing aids, and like any consumer technology product, it gets better. The technology evolves, and just like you kind of get excited for the new iPhone, I kind of get excited for the next generation of hearing aids now. So first of all, they're really small and subtle. You can kind of see how kind of hard they are to see, kind of cut back there. But they have cool things like Bluetooth. I can literally be streaming a phone call or audio to my hearing aids, and nobody really would know. So that's kind of a neat feature. The one silver lining, I think, to hearing loss is it's kind of like having noise canceling headphones anytime you need it. If it's a loud work environment or there's some noise I don't like, take out the hearing aids, no problem. And I will say, much to the chagrin of my wife, when my children were younger and they might wake up in the middle of the night crying, I wasn't usually the one who was waking up to the noise. So I wouldn't,
So if you don't like this interview and I see you just playing with your ear, you might be kind of you're on mute, Joe, intentionally. But the other thing is, I was thinking, it's a very neat Carol Burnett type of. You could just double click on your ear in order to stream or change the channel. But Jon, it's amazing how a previous guest on the show, good friend Shiv Singh, he was working at Eargo for a while, and he told me some amazing statistics about what percentage of adults have lost significant hearing or have had significant hearing loss. I do think it's interesting, just as a little aside, how Apple, with the Apple Watch, actually has hearing or has these audio levels built in where you can actually have a face or even warning set to determine if you are around a certain noise level that can actually exacerbate or cause hearing loss. So technology can help. And I think the Bluetooth, who would have ever thunk that Bluetooth would have come to hearing aids? But here you go.
Yep.
By the way, my mom, who was born with hearing loss and has been a big part of my life, said this honesty is incredible. So she appreciates she appreciates what you're saying very much, Jon. So thank you for sharing. Now, I'm not going to thank you for sharing this next fun fact about you. I'm not sure I can watch, but I guess I am a masochist. Apparently, you can dislocate your thumbs at will. So this is the part of the show where I say, look away if you do not want to watch what Jon is about to show you. But I'm closing my eyes.
All right. Well, we all have our stupid human tricks here. So here's my stupid human trick. So take my thumb and just got to get on the kind of pop it right out there, pop it back in, pop it out, pop it in, and that's all I'll subject you to today.
Okay, I was actually watching and I didn't cringe as much as I thought. So thank you for that. Christina DeGiacomo is watching. She said, "You're welcome, Joe. I will be playing Monopoly Walking Dead version tonight." Ritesh is here. Good afternoon, my friend. And he said, I never knew about Bluetooth and hearing aids. Amazing. Maybe more adults actually will go and get their ears checked and get fitted for something, especially knowing full well that we can now, Apple Music streaming right into our ears as well. Well, there's one more fun fact before we get into the meat and potatoes. And boy, do we have meat and potatoes today. And that's during quarantine. This was actually not one of your fun facts. It was something you wanted to talk about. But it's interesting enough, right? Which is you've become, I guess you should have been on Corona Cocktails, Jon, because you've become a bit of a martini expert, a mixologist, if you will. But the fortunate aspect is you've been balancing your intake of martinis with a lot of yoga streamed from YouTube, I guess, straight into your ears. So I decided to combine them and create the Yogatini. Have you made a Yogatini yet, is my question.
I have not made a Yogatini. I have made, however, probably a couple dozen Manhattans, more tiki cocktails than I care to count, old fashions, I don't know, margaritas, all sorts of good stuff. For me, the funnest part has been just like getting a bottle of some new liquor that I don't have, like a yellow chartreuse or a cognac or something. And then suddenly it just opens up a whole new set of cocktails that you can make. So that's sort of been fun for the experimentation.
So what can you teach me about a classic martini, a classic gin martini, in terms of dry, not dry, dirty, not dirty, how many olives, what are, extra cold, what straight up, what do I need to know? What is the Jon Miller perfect formula?
Well, what I'll say is, probably the most important thing to know about cocktails is that ice is to cocktails as heat is to food. And, like most people, like, especially like a martini, you think the ingredients are gin and vermouth. Most people don't tend to think that ice is actually a critical component. but that whole kind of putting in and stirring with the ice does two things. First of all, it dilutes it down to sort of take the kind of high ABV alcohol percentage off the top, which means that you can actually taste the flavors as opposed to just the burn. And it cools it, which of course just cold things taste better. And so it's interesting if you just put some water into a glass and stir it for measure the water, do 4 ounces of water, stick into a glass with ice, stir it for 30 seconds, and then strain it out. You'll see that you've added almost an ounce or more of water. And so that stirring really is kind of the critical factor. Now, classically, you want to stir drinks that are made of nothing but liquor. So like a martini, would be a stir drink, and you tend to shake drinks that either have juice or eggs, egg whites in them. So like a margarita or that has lime juice or something like that. And that's why sort of James Bond ordering his martini shaken, not stirred, makes cocktail people cringe. Because, if you know what you're doing and you're a cocktail enthusiast, you would never order it that way.
Wow, that's interesting. And so, for me as a martini newbie, I'm all about the shake instead of the stir. So I have my homework assignment. My work is cut out for me. And I'm sure people that work with you now at Demandbase are busy thinking, I had no idea. I'm sure they all know actually about the mixologist in you. But hopefully when all of this madness subsides, you and I will have a cocktail in person, a cocktail that you made. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll probably get into this, but I joined Demandbase in June when we merged with Engagio. Means most of the people I work with, I've never met in person.
Wow.
Right? So I never had a chance to make a cocktail for them. Back at Engagio, I would bartend every Friday in, kind of company parties and things. But it's been really a different experience doing this during COVID.
You know what? I have to just go down that path a little bit, because that's kind of mind-blowing that anybody who actually joined a company from, for the most part, March of last year to, we're almost a year into this, has most likely never actually met the people they work with in real life. And in real life means it's not just you and I on a screen together. It's the ability to break bread and ironically, the biblical aspect, of Moses, right? But it is the ability to actually recognize how important it is to be able to do these ritualistic aspects with our peers, with our colleagues, with the people we work with. And that has been taken away from all of us.
It makes team building, much more challenging, and just that sort of kind of human connection, on teams, and we've had to do, it's all imperfect, but little things, right? Like just you start meetings with everybody sharing a photo of their pet or something, or, everybody submits photo, like you do a baking competition where everybody bakes something and they kind of just shares photos of what they baked. The funny thing is you would never do that in a real world meeting. Usually, you might bring all your baked goods in, but you wouldn't show pictures of your pet probably. But we've had to find ways to kind of humanize things when we're doing kind of everything, virtually. I will say that one upside of this is I think it has changed the onboarding experience for a lot of people. Pre-COVID, when you joined a company, in my experience, your boss would sort of take you around, you'd meet people, you'd shake people's hands, and then maybe there'd be a big lunch or something where you kind of all go out to a lunch together. And that's kind of how you're expected to meet people and build the relationships. Maybe that's great if you're a super extrovert. But for most people, it doesn't really form the deeper connections. Whereas now, when somebody joins a company, I did this, I have my team members do this. We set up a series of about 20 to 30 one-on-ones where you actually spend half an hour or 45 minutes talking to this person about their life and their job. Mm-hmm. And even though it's remote and even though it's disconnected, in some ways, it actually enabled me to get to know people who are not my direct coworkers better than I would have had sort of being remote not forced that.
And it definitely seems that when we do go back to the office, that we should carry forward or carry over some of these, what I guess we would call icebreaker questions, icebreaker aspects, which is before we begin, everybody gets a chance to, I do them on Friday on these community shows. Last Friday was, what season would you be? Winter, spring, summer, or fall. By the way, what season would you be, Jon?
Definitely summer. I like it warm.
I also like it warm as well. I'm still, the South African is not used to winters in the Northeast. But just that frivolous, almost throwaway icebreaker. You lean in, you smile, and everyone gets a turn to basically, just to kind of get off the mark. So I really enjoy that little. I did not expect to discuss that, and it's fantastic that we did. By the way, Ritesh says, I totally agree. I've got to know people a lot better this way. 1 hour intro, both personally and professionally, with respect to these Zoom 101. So that is definitely a common theme. Look, we're about to talk about account-based marketing, and maybe how that has changed or been impacted as well in this COVID era. I thought what would be a nice thing to do is to revisit some of my intro slides that I've used in presentations that kind of set up why I believe this is so important, mission critical, in fact. So it begins with this idea of what if we were just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? And that certainly speaks to marketing, right? Moving money and budget from one bucket to another while the ship is going down. What if we got it all wrong? What if we got it basically completely backwards? And what I was really referring to then was acquisition versus retention, based on the very simple 80-20 rule, that if 80% of our revenue came from our customers, our repeat returning recurring business, why and therefore 20% from acquisition, why were we spending 80% of our marketing dollars against that acquisition bucket, but only 20% against the retention? And so I flipped the funnel, and instead of AIDA, awareness, interest, desire, action, I created ADIA, which stood for acknowledgement, dialogue, incentivization, and activation. And that was the essence of the flipped funnel. Now those are my slides. Those are my only slides, because now cue the B2B funnel that isn't as much about ADIA, but is a different funnel. And I found this on the web that really talks about this whole idea of fishing with nets versus fishing with spears. I loved the idea, because one of the things I would also do in my presentations would say, we try and cast out a wide net, but what if our net was full of holes, which of course it is. So Jon, cue account-based marketing, cue you, and this idea of fishing with spears. How do you see initially the idea and the whole practice and philosophy of account-based marketing, and what percentage of B2B is still focused on the lead gen net approach versus the ABM spear approach?
Yeah, in many ways, I think this sort of account-based wave, came about in response to some of the limitations of the sort of traditional, lead-based inbound demand gen model, which frankly had been so popular back at Marketo, right? So some of those limitations of the kind of the traditional model, one, as you said, it's a net. We don't know, we can't really focus on specifically, are we getting the most valuable, the most profitable companies, the ones that we're gonna win and we're gonna retain and expand, right? It wasn't very targeted, if you will. And then the other thing that happened is everybody jumped on that kind of demand gen content bandwagon. And, all of a sudden, a tactic like just writing blog posts to get ranked, on keywords that worked 15 years ago stopped working. The information explosion, became, made it even harder for buyers to research and find things. And marketers were sort of saying, okay, hey, the stuff that got me here, lead-based demand generation, isn't working. I'm not finding the right companies. It's harder to reach through. And they realized that, not as a either or, but as an and, finding really valuable accounts and putting disproportionate attention on them so that you could actually really stand out and be relevant, turns out was a pretty good strategy. And it had an interesting side effect of just that because it was account-based, it was much more of the way salespeople like to work. I mean, salespeople don't talk about how many leads they closed. They talk about how many accounts they closed, right? Even if you go back to the very beginning of this whole thing, it's not business to lead, it's business to business. And, and so that was the other factor is, marketers sort of realized, I probably should be talking about accounts just like my sales counterparts do. And if we can do that, we can kind of all be on the same page. So that's really what drove ABM. And there's no doubt that it's become incredibly popular. I was just looking at some data, more than 70% of people, at least in our research, which might have some sample bias, but more than 70% of the companies that we talk to have some element of an ABM program in place. But I think what people are increasingly realizing is that, as I said, it's not either or. They have their ABM programs for some accounts, and then they have their traditional demand gen programs for everything else. And the two strategies actually work together in a very kind of complementary way when done right.
So Ritesh says he has to leave, but he wanted people to know that he is a big fan of Demandbase, use it extensively. And he said, Jon, we should have a chat. So I will connect the two of you. And then he says, for lead gen, I've renamed it Accountbased Targeting. Whoops, sorry to shout. So he just, for those of you listening to the audio podcast, you would not have realized he was shouting, but he wrote it in caps. So Account-Based Targeting. Well, here's an interesting thing, which is you forget about account-based targeting. You've created a new thought, a new vision, and I'm a marketing geek, so I got very, very excited about it when I saw it. So you've created this, and you're playing with this. This is in the lab right now, as it were. Account-based experience. And this is your definition. Account-based experience is a go-to-market strategy that uses data and insights to orchestrate relevant marketing and sales actions throughout the B2B customer lifecycle. So I would love for you to walk us through ABX, if you will. Why are you thinking about this? What does it mean in terms of actual rubber hits the road? And we can kind of talk a little bit about it because, just like customer service evolved, right, to customer experience and now what I would call customer obsession, it's fantastic that someone in such an influential position is thinking about evolving this practice into a higher order.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple key factors I think that are at play here. And the first one, I mean, I was the one probably that most tried to sort of position account-based marketing as fishing with spears. I mean, I talked to that. I mentioned that kind of over and over and over again. But when you think about it, being poked by a spear doesn't feel very good. That's not a good customer experience. And the way kind of we sort of told people to practice ABM was go find those accounts, the good ones, the ones you really want, and target them. I mean, like military language here, target them, regardless of whether they had any interest in hearing from you at all. And in many ways, that just meant more spam, more people SDRs calling them when they weren't even like thinking about, a purchase. And it sort of created this disconnect in the buyer experience between what was going to actually be relevant to the buyer and what the account-based marketer was trying to do. And so through all the best intentions of being relevant and trusted, ABM in some ways, at some times, hurt our customer experience, not helped it. The other big problem with ABM is in the name. Like it's been said time and time again, you can't have an account-based strategy if it doesn't really span the entire go-to-market team. You need marketing and sales and service to all be working together to have kind of a coordinated account experience. Otherwise, it's disconnected. And as we all know, disconnected experiences aren't a good customer experience. So by elevating it out of account-based marketing into something higher, we're actually bringing the rest of the go-to-market team, into this. So really, in a nutshell, account-based experience is about engaging with buyers in a trusted, relevant way on their own terms. It's about knowing where they are in their journey, where that account is in its journey, and then using intelligence and insights to, frankly, know when to engage and how to engage at each point. So, at the very, very top of the customer experience, I think ABX brings in concepts of brand and emotion, right? We're not, just because you're a target account of mine, I'm not going to just try to get you on a phone or get you on a meeting when you're at the very top of your journey. I'm just going to try to connect, make you aware of who we are and frankly, help you feel positively about us. And again, that's just things like literally, emotion-based brand advertising is kind of what's appropriate kind of at the top. You move a little further down, maybe they're starting to become aware of your category, right? Now, you still don't want to be trying to, cold call them and attack them, but here's where trusted thought leadership can really make a difference. People do trust thought leaders. They trust experts. And so in some cases, you're sort of moving from emotion at the top into logic to sort of just say, hey, we are an expert who can help you and can help you frame your problem. Gartner research actually shows that people are willing to hear from, buyers are willing to hear from salespeople if they can bring relevant information that helps them structure and frame their business problems. So that's sort of, we're moving now into a different phase here. Then we move a little further. There are magic moments when buyers are willing to hear from us, right? It's when they're just about to enter into that, buying cycle. Sorry, I actually have a stat here. I'll find it in a second. That I think it's 71%, of buyers have said, that at the right time, they are willing to kind of, hear in the right way from a buyer or a salesperson. So
I want to ask you a quick question about that, which is the magic moment. I like that concept of a magic moment, which means sometimes people will be like, listen, I appreciate the pet icebreaker. I appreciate the lunch. I appreciate the people don't care much you know until they know much you care. But I actually want to buy right now. I want to know everything about it. When that happens, are salespeople ready for the most part to actually just say, all right, here you go? Or, sometimes I'm just wondering whether when we focus on the soft sell so much, that when a magic moment presents itself, are we actually aware that it's in front of our face?
Well, this is kind of why I think ABX wasn't possible just even the way I'm describing it wasn't possible just a few years ago, because this is really where new technology kind of kicks in. And here's why is, classically back in the marketing automation days with tools like Marketo, we would track what people called the digital body language to know when a company might be in a buying cycle, right? We'd say, hey, this company, these buyers, these leads are coming to my website and they're downloading my ebooks and they're opening my emails. So there must be something going on. I'm going to call them. What's happened, though, is most of that or much of that buying signal has moved off of our own websites, right? There's so much content out there. There's so much information out there that buyers, frankly, don't want to come to our site and have to fill out a form just to get an ebook, because they know if they do that, we're going to start calling them and banging them. And so they've moved to doing their research on communities, reading articles on third-party websites, going to sites like G2 or Trust Radius to kind of do research. And we've sort of lost that digital body language or at least a big part of that digital body language. But what we've seen just in the last couple of years is the rise of what the industry is calling intent data, which kind of is a wonky name, but it's basically the ability to sort of actually monitor what's happening out on the open web to identify what topics accounts are interested in, and when they're showing spikes in that interest, which indicate the magic moment. Now, we could get into an interesting discussion around how we track this and privacy and all that, but the key, I think, more than anything else, is that nobody's identifying what a single person is doing. What you're looking for is a pattern of behavior at the account. So it's no personally identifiable information or anything like that. But when you start seeing these patterns of, hey, this account is suddenly researching a lot more about IT security software, right? If you can identify that, you know it's the magic moment. And you also know what topic it is that will be relevant for you to reach out to them. So that intent data really is the secret sauce.
It's so funny. I wrote down the wrong word. I wrote down intense data.
Sorry,
but maybe it's Freudian in some way, shape, or form, whether it's intense or intend data. But really, really interesting proxies, I think. So walk us through a couple of. I know that you were very deliberate in your definition, and by the way, I think this is going to stick. It's just so obvious to me that ABX is a higher order than ABM. So congratulations for creating something that I think is going to have some real sticking and staying power. But are there any words specifically that you want to focus on the definition itself? Because I know that when we were communicating, you highlighted some of these aspects as well. What's the key? Is there a key difference right now in the word, even in the words, and ultimately a couple more of the benefits that you see playing out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'd point out the word strategy, right? This is not a campaign, right? You don't say, hey, I'm going to do ABX this quarter, right? This is a way of thinking about really building your go-to-market team, which really ties to that marketing and sales point, right? This is more than just marketing. It's the complete go-to-market function. I think that it's I'd pull out kind of the data insights and the relevance, right? Because it's really about, again, using both research, but also AI, like I just described with the intent data, to know when and how to engage, and what to say so that you can actually engage buyers in a trusted way on their own terms. And then it's also, the word experience, really in itself, suggests the entire customer life cycle. And it really thinks about kind of every aspect of the experience, from brand to creating pipeline to closing deals to, frankly, perhaps most importantly, the post-sale experience. And how do we, as you say, put more of your time and attention, on the customers and not on the prospects.
And then of course, the whole point about the flipped funnel, at least the way it should be thought of, is not necessarily. It's maybe linear the first time, but it's the ability to. Now you're playing with your ear, which makes me think you're muting me. But but it is how to use existing customers to gain new ones. Because if thought leadership is not the ultimate Trojan horse and best practice of B2B marketing, well, then it has a counterpart, and that counterpart is all to do with word of mouth 100%. And referrals and testimonials, and it's just as simple as that. And quite frankly, oftentimes the white paper is the combination of those two, right? It's the thought leadership combined with those testimonials.
Yeah, in many ways, I haven't talked about this publicly, but I think, there's a flip here, right? Where we used to build our brands with thought leadership first. And I think, we're moving increasingly into a world, because there's such a deluge of content, that we're actually, the way you build your brand today is with the word of mouth and the advocacy and the influencers talking about you. I was just talking to somebody last night about, we need to invent a new position, which is offsite SEO, right? How do we make sure that anytime somebody is talking about us or our category anywhere, that we're showing up in those conversations? And so I think that's a really huge part of what it means to be a marketer today, is to be focusing on that again, the account experience, but holistically speaking, including kind of that word of mouth.
Wow, there's something really, really interesting in what you call offsite SEO, because it's not hard at all to imagine that at a conference, for example, that every word is being recorded and transcribed, and can be fed with permissions, of course, into some kind of a database that would be able to say, wow, that was amazing that this panel at that conference happened to say something that is supremely relevant or connected, and there's the ability potentially for a response to add value, even in real time. There's something very cool about that. I mean, obviously, we know for the most part now that we have a little dot on the new iPhones, right? That tells us when we're being listened in. We're not talking about that. But there is some very interesting things that actually go towards not, I guess, digital body language, but actual physical words and language that can take place in a business environment. So that's interesting to me, very interesting.
When you're talking about events, I mean, one thing that we haven't talked much about is, just how the whole practice of ABM and ABX changed in the COVID era. It turns out, I mean, pre-COVID, the number one strategy people used in ABM was in-person events, right? Whether it's trying to get people to your booth at a big trade show or a much more intimate dinner or something like that.
Right.
That's blown up, obviously. Nobody, most business buyers aren't going to big or small events anymore. And what we've seen is this huge shift to digital, which, I mean, every industry has seen that. But, Twilio put out a study which said that they think that there is that the industry moved 6 years ahead of digital in 6 months. And I believe that's exactly what happened in, account-based strategies, where we just saw this huge increase in, strategies like account-based advertising, as I can't build my brand at a trade show anymore. So now I'm going to do it in this very targeted, relevant way with account advertising.
And I actually last week I had a conversation about networking with Dan Silverberg, and we actually realized, it was like an epiphany, that networking itself is far more efficient and effective in this virtual environment by virtue of sometimes just the fact that in this environment, if I see your name and you seem interesting and I want to connect with you, I can just go and send you a DM on Zoom, or just go to LinkedIn and connect with you. And it's really awkward and hard to do that when you're face to face in an environment, possibly with a drink in your one hand and trying to navigate your phone in the other. So that's interesting as well. Before I forget, we always have a quote of the episode. And I think I love how X is really encompassing of the whole experience and holistically from an integrated standpoint, but it really does begin with human connections. And so your quote is, all marketing is better when you know who you're marketing to. So I always say to my guests, do you know who said that? But be warned, this is a trick question indeed.
I was about to say, because I thought you were trying to imply that I said it, and I was like, did I say that? I don't.
You did not say it.
I don't know who said that.
This was Chris Golick, if I got his name correct, the founder at Demandbase.
There you go.
Your founder said that, which again, it begins with a who, which is no different to P&G's The Who, right? Not a band, but really being able to understand the human being on the other end of that call or meeting, etc. But as I said to you, I love what you're doing with X. So please keep me up to date with what you're doing. But now let's talk about the company, about Demandbase. And the first, there are so many directions we could go in. One is being part of an acquisition, which we could do an entire show on. But what I want to focus on is specifically, number one, your transition from a chief product officer to a chief marketing officer. Now, it's not new to you, marketing, but what is the biggest difference and leap from going from the product side to the marketing side?
Well, I would say for me, it's actually it's a two-piece step, right? Because 6 months ago, I went from being the CEO of my company to being the chief product officer, as part of the merger. And obviously, that's a big change when you sort of no longer be the CEO, if you will.
Yeah, no doubt.
So for me, in many cases, honestly, I hadn't started a new job in 20 years. Because I started a job in 1999, and then since then, every company I went to was a company that I started, and so it just kind of joining into an existing company, not as the CEO, was an interesting transition. But what made it work, honestly, is a deep trusted relationship that I built with the CEO through the acquisition process. And if we didn't have that, it wouldn't have worked. I don't think of myself as a product person first and foremost. I do think of myself as a marketer. But what Demandbase needed when we brought the two companies together was an intense focus on product, because we wanted to bring the Engagio platform and the Demandbase platform together in record time. And so, I said, okay, that's going to be my focus, because that's what I felt was the most important thing for the company. And I'm incredibly proud. It's one of the highlights of my career of how well and how quickly we actually brought these two platforms together. I mean, people in the industry thought it was going to take a year or 2 years to merge these two systems, and we did get it done in 5 months. And there's reasons why we were able to do it without sacrificing quality, because of the way how well the two companies fit together. But once we did that and we released the Demandbase One platform back in November, at that point, I'm very comfortable. I'm not a promotional person, but I'm comfortable saying this is now the best ABM platform in the category. And so, really, strategically, we looked at what the business needed, and I realized that kind of taking our go-to-market and our marketing to the next level was the next thing that the company needed the most. And, I guess I'm cocky enough to realize that, or to think that, well, if that's the thing that the company needs the most now, I want to take a stab at it, give me the ball and let me see kind of what I can do with this marketing team.
So there seems to be a really nice aspect of it, going through these multiple transitions, right? From multiple cultures, corporations, leadership teams, product focuses, but specifically there's the sense of ownership, which is being able to specialize as a marketer in one specific set of responsibilities. But one of the things you talk about is this idea of bringing the philosophy of what it is to build a modern marketing organization. So we'll talk about what the new Demandbase is and will look like, but clearly will benefit from this idea of applying new approaches like ABX. But specifically, I want to hear your definition of what is a modern marketing organization versus one that is not modern.
Well, in many ways, I mean, the principles of ABX are just intertwined with that, I think essentially. So, I think that it is one, first of all, that thinks about the account experience first and foremost, and really does try to align the way you engage with each account with where that account is in its journey, so that you can be trusted and relevant. That means little things like, one of the first things I did was I sort of stopped the SDRs from calling every campaign response, right? Just because you download an ebook or sign up for a webinar doesn't mean the SDR needs to call you, And so I'd rather have our SDRs focusing their time and energy on really engaging in a meaningful way with those accounts that are in the magic moment. So, that's an example of trying to apply the principles to kind of doing internally. At the very top of the funnel, doubling down in thought leadership. with the whole kind of ABX concept and pushing that. And then probably my single biggest initiative for the year is going to be driving that kind of advocacy and word of mouth. In Demandbase, we have over 750 customers. As far as I can tell, that's like literally like double what any other ABM platform has. You know, so that is literally an army of potential advocates who we have yet to really do a good job activating, of getting them to sort of be having those conversations on our behalf. You know, with, you know, in the communities where we aren't, you know, in the boardrooms where we can't be part of, you know, like I need to advocate, or sorry, I need to activate, you know, that army of for word of mouth and kind of create some buzz. So that's you know, that's you know, that I don't know what the phrase is here. You know, 10 years ago, if you were a B2B marketer, you led with content, and it's content. You know, we heard content is king. You know, and I think we're in a different era now where, you know, content maybe is part of it, but it's word of mouth and advocacy is king.
So from content is king to word of mouth and advocacy, but it seems like really what you're doing, the modern, you know, I will ... you, or fill in the dots myself. The modern marketing organization is one that clearly is built on and around word of mouth and advocacy and referrals, and many of the principles that I wrote about in Flip the Funnel. But it seems that for the most part, that what you are doing is you are living the reality that you know, what I call the marketing bow tie, which is the acquisition, but a badly tied one. So Scott Monty would not endorse this because he ties his bow ties exquisitely. The acquisition side of the bow tie is smaller because we're more efficient at acquiring new customers. The retention side is larger because we are so much more effective now at being able to not just upsell and you know, and cross-sell, but actually really be able to develop these kinds of relationships that can produce the ultimate inside-out approach. And so I really love how you're talking about, you know, being able to see every one of those accounts as a potential referral or referral-based relationship, if you will. But at the same time, going back to the fact that you know, I am now, I put in mickey@mouse.com every time I'm trying to get an ebook, because I just know that I'm going to get absolutely inundated. And I guess my final question for you on that is, are we too far gone? Is it too little too late to now be able to get business buyers and influencers into a mindset that they're not going to be, I don't want to say spammed, but certainly kind of, you know, stalked maybe when they just do something as innocuous as downloading a white paper?
Well, I don't know why we need to put the white paper behind a form. You know, first and foremost,
Good point. That's
if I'm going to have that if somebody wants to access that content, I wrote it for a reason. I want them to read it because I want to help educate and entertain them and kind of bring them forward. The only reason why you put it behind a form is so that you can like track the buying signal. But frankly, with technology, we don't need to do that. You know, I mean, with, you know, if you have a halfway decent marketing automation implementation, you know, you can know that somebody downloaded that ebook, even if they never, you know, even if they haven't, you know, filled out a form right then and there, because they're already cookied. Even if they're not cookied with your ABM platform, you can at least know what company it is. You know, and that's for an ABX process, knowing the company is all you really need.
right. And then of course there's also this little classic thing called a call to action with some kind of an offer inside the body, inside the actual paper. Very, very simple, brilliant, succinct point. Jon, before we get into the Corona question, you're bringing a new vision of ABX, which is tremendous. You're bringing that vision to creating the modern marketing organization. But what is the new Demandbase? Give us a little sneak preview of what people can expect from the company with this new approach, leadership at the helm, and obviously post-acquisition.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I've already talked about, Demandbase is the leading ABM platform out there. It's got the most customers, we're the largest, we're the most complete solution. But the blessing and curse of a company like Demandbase is that it's 15 years old, which means we've been around for a while, and people are aware of Demandbase, and they've heard of Demandbase, but they may have certain perceptions about Demandbase that are outdated, right, from the old Demandbase, the old platform, the old company. In many ways, we are a new Demandbase, right? We have a new leadership team, we have a new platform, we have a new vision. And so mostly I just want to kind of, teach the whole world, forget everything you think you know about this company, because this is the new leader in B2B marketing. And, that's what's energizing and driving me. And I hope it catches on in the marketplace.
Well, I with your leadership and with your new vision, I have no doubt. But now, so that we have no doubt in terms of answering the Corona question, everybody wants to know, and I mean everybody's clamoring to find out who would play Jon Miller in a movie. And don't say Stephen Miller.
Yeah, no. I mean, so it's got to be somebody who I think, first of all, looks a little bit like me, roughly, ideally kind of the right age. And have sort of, the appropriate gravitas and so on. So I was, thinking about it. I'm thinking Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who's an actor. He was on, I mostly remember him as I think Denny from Grey's Anatomy. But if you sort of fast forward a little bit, he's got kind of the beard and the mustache now these days as well. So, I think he's got both the seriousness that I would have with a little bit of the sense of humor, but also looks like me.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan. If I happen to glance to my Monopoly board, I'm imagining that you're talking about Mr. Negan himself.
There you go.
It's like looking in a mirror, as far as I'm concerned.
Give the head a little bit further back, and you're ready to rock.
So there you go, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I've just heard. Hold on. It's just coming in through my hearing aid to say he has already accepted the role to play you in the movie. So there you go. Jon, I loved finding out a little bit more about the space. It is fascinating to see the B2B side of a vision that I wrote for the most part as a B2C marketer. But if you guys out there want to hang out with us just for a wee bit longer, come and join us on the Zoom after show. We will be there for about just under 30 minutes. That's bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. This has been a conversation with Jon Miller, the Chief Marketing and Product Officer of Demandbase. You can follow him on the Twitter at Jon Miller, and you can connect with him, Jon Miller 2. I can't believe there's even a Jon Miller 1, but whatever.
We got to start that. We can talk about it in the after show.
All right, so now you have an incentive to come over there. Jon, thanks again for your time. And of course, Chuck Norris has the final word.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
See you guys tomorrow.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.